Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and co-parents of all ages, this podcast is for you. Introducing and the centering the Amicable divorce expert, Judith Weigel.
In the world of relationships and marriage, people look for that one relationship that completes them, that makes them happy, and that will last forever. But divorce statistics suggest differently. 50% of first marriages end in divorce, 60% of second marriages, and 70% of third marriages end in divorce. There are two issues here when we're looking at relationships and divorce. Choosing the right person with whom we think we're in love with, and leaving that person at some point without feeling as badly as most of us do in divorce. These two issues are what our guest, Deborah Peters, business coach, couples coach, mindset expert, and specialist in neuroscience, will explain in a unique and enlightening way to help everyone going through divorce feel much more hopeful, understanding of, and accepting of the relationship path that they're on. And Deborah, you have taught me a lot, even in our pre-interview. So fascinated and excited to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. What a great topic.
Isn't it, though?
Yeah.
So you approach relationships quite differently than the average person, don't you?
I do. And it took me a long time to get there. I grew up in a very traditional type environment, and it never really sat well with me. You know, I didn't really see marriage the way it was taught. There was something about it that went against the grain of who I am, even as a child. I didn't really know what that meant or what to do with it. But as I grew, I gained a lot of clarity around it. There's still some aspects of it I reject, but more importantly, it's evolved, you know, so it's not looking at the traditional structure or beliefs around marriage that rubs me the wrong way by any means. It's actually, there's no wrongness to it. It's how we grow as a humanity, how we evolve, and our understanding of what's possible grows, and we apply that to our relationship dynamics. And I think that's really the key.
When we were talking, the way you talk about relationships is there's energy, there's dynamic, there is no wrong in the length of time that a relationship exists, because there's a point and a purpose for short and long-term relationships. Did I understand you correctly?
Indeed. So the way I look at relationships is that all relationships are a mirror. And as that person, let's say we're talking about a committed partner, what is that person mirroring back to you about you? I think we've all had that relationship where somebody brought out the absolute worst in us, you know?
Yes.
And we were just like a crazy person the entire time we were with them. And then as soon as that relationship ended, we got our sensibility back. And so there's an example of how people mirror back to us who we are being with ourselves. And that's how I look at every relationship. So back in the day when I was doing full-time couples coaching, there was two questions that came out of my mouth. The first question was, can this marriage be saved? Because if I got any sort of hesitancy from either one of them, I knew there's something else that needed to happen first, and that was they needed to decide in their heart that their relationship could be saved, or there was nothing I could do to help them, because otherwise it's futile, you know? Right. So that's the first question. And the second question, which popped up repeatedly throughout the sessions, was, you know, whose energy is this? Where did you learn this? Whose behavior are you repeating here? Who is this person representing from your imprint years, your modeling years, which is 0 to 7 and 7 to 14, that is being triggered here? And I feel like that's the work that needs to be done before you get married.
Right. But generally it's done after we're in trouble.
Right. Because we're in trouble.
Because we're in trouble, yeah.
Because the threat of this person leaving us. You know, it's like, okay, oh my gosh, and we know we've said it and we've heard it said to us, I'll do anything. Like, I'll go to therapy. What do you want me to do? Let's go to counseling. And it's, you know, it's kind of, horse is kind of down the road at that point. So then what does the next relationship bring? Well, ideally, there's a bit of a gap in between relationships where you have some time to self-reflect, and in that self-reflection, take stock and be accountable to your own unresolved issues, your own traumas, your own abandonment, whatever it is, and then really be honest with yourself and authentic. Because, you know, was it really this person, or was I triggered by my own unresolved issues? And listen, I'm not making excuses and saying that other people don't have, the other person in the relationship doesn't have responsibility for their behavior. That's not my point. So if anybody's listening going, well, what about them? It's like, them too, you know, it's, and there's never an excuse for any kind of abuse. Never. So whatever kind of abuse it is, whether it's gaslighting, emotional stuff, mental stuff, physical stuff, financial withholding, whatever, there's never an excuse for that. So let me just put that out there straight up.
And if the other person is a mirror of who we are, and there's abuse, whether it's physical, emotional, financial, whatever, how does that person who's I'm using a word victim, which you are going to tell me never to use again. I know you are, because I remember my notes that I took and where I want to go with this. But the person who's feeling put upon, the one that's experiencing the abuse.
The one that feels powerless.
Okay, good. The one who feels powerless. So what do they need to do? What do they need to know immediately? And then what do they need to do?
So there's a few things. I mean, it's kind of a complex answer, but first of all, just on the surface, you know, we train people how to treat us by what we're willing to accept. And if we don't have the boundaries in the relationship, we usually don't have boundaries with ourselves. And so what that points to is that on some level, we don't love ourselves. Like, we haven't integrated the adult in us and the child in us. There's a duality going on. And that then will get flushed out in the relationship dynamic. If you're in an abusive relationship, you certainly are not the cause. And because I've been in abusive relationships, I've been in many abusive relationships. It took me probably 5 of them to wake up to what I was doing to myself through them. And that's the work that needs to be done. You know, first you need to leave the relationship and start to nurture yourself and take better care of yourself, just on a basics, you know, on levels that are basic. And then getting into the relationship you have with yourself and be honest with yourself about how you really see yourself and where's your self-worth? Where's your self-esteem? Where's your sense of having a right to be here in this life, on this planet as you? And you heal that. And it's not a short journey. It takes massive desire and commitment to want to dig that deep within yourself. But when you do, then you stop bringing or allowing people into your life that are broken, because abusers are broken.
Right. And what you had been saying previously when we spoke, I love this. You said when a relationship needs to end or is ending, there's an unwinding of the energy of the relationship, but there's also an unwinding of the energy of you, of each person in the relationship.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Because it is all energy. I think this is what's happening in humanity right now, is there's a shift happening in the paradigm that we hold around what makes a good partner, husband or wife. And it's not the degree, it's not where they went to college, it's not the bank account. I mean, those things on paper have always been the framework. And certainly, you know, it's great to be with someone who's accomplished and dedicated to expanding themselves and are committed to peak performance. 100%. I get it. Me too. The thing is that what else is there? There's a whole lot more. I have a client that said to me one time, you know, the difference between men and women is men like to be needed and women like to be wanted. And I don't think that'll ever change. You know,
I understand that.
Yeah. I mean, I resonate with that personally. I want my man to want me. And he wants me to need him. And so as women become even more and more self-created, especially financially and monetarily, and men become more and more in tune with their emotions and their spiritual self, it breaks down that old construct that didn't have really any wiggle room.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. They're very rigid roles.
Yeah. And we're adjusting to that still. I mean, it's in play. It's not done. And so the energy of the relationship is really the key. It's because if the energy is not there, but everything on paper is there, you're not going to be happy. And the person you marry, that you commit your heart to, that you give that covenant before God, is the single biggest decision you will ever make in your life. And if the energy is not right between you, you could be completely miserable. And it can throw you off track. It can throw you off your life's path of what you're supposed to create in the world.
Deborah, how many people, when you were a couples coach, said to you, I knew before the wedding I shouldn't have gotten married.
Oh, yeah.
I had that pit in my stomach. I had that feeling, but I just thought, well, maybe it's just nerves.
Yeah. Lots.
Yeah.
Lots. In fact, I did a few sessions with an engaged couple. And and this might be a good segue. We can talk about values. I did a values exercise with them, and there was so many conflicts. It was so conflicted between them. And I suggested that they postpone the wedding. Like, don't do this. You guys aren't ready. You have some work to do first. And they're like, well, everything's paid for.
Yes. Yeah.
We have to.
Yep.
Can I just tell you that marriage turned out to be hell on wheels for a decade and was a financial drain of millions of dollars, leaving both of them with poor credit and no money and a massive downturn in their lifestyle that one of them has still not recovered from. And the other one is like digging hard to get out of the hole.
So what motivates people to stick with it, to not look at the obvious signs, especially when they have professional help trying to guide them? What makes them still want to go through with? I know they say money. Is it really that?
Nah. You know what I think that it is many times is what other people will think.
Oh,
They don't want to be judged. They don't want to be embarrassed.
yeah.
They don't want to have to say, we've changed our minds. They don't want to appear weak. I don't know. I guess it's probably different for each person.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has their own reasonings, but always it's going to be about not wanting to let others down or not wanting to look bad or maybe just, they've been told and programmed and conditioned from childhood on that marriage is not something that is really fulfilling, is something you do because it's part of what you need to create in the world. I don't know. I guess the answer would be as different as each person that doesn't do it.
True. Or you're so committed to the ideal you have in your head of what you're heading towards that you will minimize all of the red flags and the warning signs and the obvious things that professionals start bringing up like yourself because you want to stay committed to that ideal. We're stubborn people.
Yeah, you're right. And it's a romanticized concept, isn't it?
Yeah.
Plus, I think there's a little bit of scarcity programming in there. If I don't, then who will I find? It's hard to find a person. That whole scarcity. I have this saying, when you meet one person that's all that, there's hundreds more in queue because it's energy. When you tap into the energy of who you are, what you're creating, who you're becoming, and you really are aligned with that, people start to show up in your life that resonate there as well. And they could be clients, they could be friends, they could be buddies, and they could be your next husband or wife. When that's happening, because it's energy and energy is infinite, we don't get energy, we are energy. Then there's a whole bunch more like it or better.
Okay, so the light bulb, speaking of energy, just went on in my head when you said that. And I said, okay, well, this is really no different than when we're choosing our careers, we're starting a business, and we're in our right lane, so to speak. We're choosing what resonates with who we are as an energetic being. Things just happen. People just walk through the door. We meet the right people. We start connecting, and it just grows bigger and bigger. So too with relationships, right? That's where the energy is.
Absolutely. It's that old saying, like, it happens when you least expect it. Well, I would reframe that and I would say it happens when you're aligned. Because when you're aligned, you're so in the moment, in present time, that you don't have expectations. You're just basking in the alignment.
Okay, keep talking about that. That's so interesting. The expectations aren't there. You're basking in the alignment. You're enjoying the present moment, what you're doing, what you're expressing. And if you go back to your mirror concept, you will then you will bring in those people that mirror your alignment, your
Absolutely.
energy.
Yeah, they just show up. It's like magic, only it's not. It's just quantum physics, it's just the way the universe is designed. And I think when we stop white knuckling anything, whether it's love or money, which by the way are the same vibration, or that next client, when we stop white knuckling it and we just allow ourselves to be guided, even your business will show you which direction it wants to grow. Your desire to be committed, to be partnered, it will guide you. I'm big on writing stuff down. It's how I create everything. And it's also how I get into the receiving mode, which is another experience, because we can ask for it, but are you open to receiving? And so when I write it out, it always starts to percolate and show itself in examples in my life, like little experiences. Might be a line in a song. It might be something I overhear people saying when they're walking down the street, but it always starts to percolate and show up. And that's how and then I talk to myself and I say, okay, the thing you've written down that you're asking for, that person, that client, that deal, that lover, it's on its way to you. And these are the signs. And then you hold to that. And so when the doubt comes in, or you're spending another night alone in your big bed, you can remind yourself of the little signs that have been presenting themselves, that it's here energetically. Just be willing to allow it to show up in your life physically. Get out of your own way and just stop working so hard at it.
I can understand that, but I have to go back one quick second.
Okay.
Love and money are the same energy?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. So it's really just about self-love. The more you align and love yourself unconditionally, meaning it's not because you drive a certain car, it's not because you're in a certain zip code or your house is a certain square footage. That's conditional. When you love yourself, even if you're standing in front of the mirror naked and your body's not fit or perfect or whatever we're taught we should be, and you can just stand there and just love yourself as you are, that's an energy, that's a vibration. And with that love, inner love, comes love through others. I'm not going to say from others, through others. And so the same goes for money. When you stop chasing money, I always used to hear these things about do what you love and the money will follow. And in the beginning part of my career, I was doing a lot and the money wasn't following until I stopped thinking about it that way. I didn't understand it. And now I do. It's not when you do what you love, it's when you love you, then whatever you do, you will appreciate. And appreciation is the same thing as love, right?
Right. And I actually started flashing on a couple people that I know who really like themselves. They really do. Sometimes to the point of focusing a little too much on themselves, but they really like themselves and they're very successful. And they enjoy being successful, but they're not focusing on the money. They're enjoying the money that's coming in.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
But most importantly, they're enjoying themselves and how they're expressing themselves in their work, in their life.
Yeah. And in the doing part, they're having fun.
Oh, without a doubt, working really hard, but it's not a big deal.
Yeah. It's actually a creation.
Yes.
Because we create everything. Everything's creation. Whether it's success in your business or, the lover in your bed, everything is creation. And how are you aligning with that? That's really the key. So I'm excited about where we're headed as a humanity when it comes to, relationships and couples and just the freedom that it's creating, pardon me, for people to be able to look at the choices that they're making in their relationship dynamics and letting it unfold for them instead of thinking that they've got to go chase this person down on a certain timeline to fit into a a social norm that is so out of touch. It's just so out of touch.
Right. So maybe this fits what I'm going to ask you, because this fascinated me when you said relationships are a long-term growth experience. And so even if you have more than one marriage, you can't look at that as, I'm just not good at marriage. Look, I've had 2 or 3.
No.
You have to look at it as an ongoing journey in connecting.
And yeah, so let's kind of unpack the notion of repelling, because I think that's going to fit right here. So, people vibrate out of range all the time. I remember I was dating this guy years ago, and I had moved across the country, and he had come to be with me, and we were talking about friendships. My friendship base had changed because I changed geography by, the width of a country. And he saw that as a negative, like I couldn't maintain friendships in my life. Mm. And he was so proud that he'd had the same friends since high school. And I thought, well, that's interesting. So you haven't outgrown each other yet. What's up with that? Who's going to grow here? It's the comfort zone. It's all a matter of perspective. You can look at it from either angle. I had grown so much in my environment. I needed a bigger environment in order for me to continue to spread my wings. And I did invite the people that I was close with to stay friends, regardless of the geography, and they weren't interested. And they weren't interested because I had left them, and I had different interests now. I had a different focus now. I saw the world in a new way, and we just no longer aligned with that. And this happens in marriages too. People fall out of range all the time. You raise your vibration through self-love. The relationship you have with yourself is the biggest relationship you're going to have. And people either can roll with that because they're raising their vibration, or they're not. And then you suddenly are like 2 ships passing in the night. So you can't make that wrong. If you do, you're actually condemning your own growth and saying there's something wrong with your own growth. If someone goes through a downturn in their life and they go, because we have these, we'll have to do this maybe in another show if you like, but we have these values systems that are literally a consciousness, like an energetic concept that we go through in life as we evolve and grow our souls as human beings on this planet. And as we go through these different growth, I'll call them awarenesses, where we're aware of ourselves in different ways that we haven't been aware of ourselves in the past, then we sort of go through this recap, where we kind of like recap aspects of ourselves that we've either denied, buried, forgotten, lost track of because we got busy doing life, etc. And sometimes we sort of like circle back. It's like a DNA spiral. You go up and down the spiral. So it's not a hierarchy where you get to this place and suddenly you're better than everyone. It's like we're going through this growth as a spiritual being. We have to experience different layers and aspects of ourselves. And if we don't clean it up at whatever level, then we kind of got to go back and sort of like finish that up so that we can move forward in a bigger way. Often that happens in marriages, and it's hard to identify because it's like, why is this person not wanting to work anymore? Why is this person not interested in goals or our dreams or success? And it's because they've gone back into some aspect of themselves to heal, to recoup, to let go, to resolve, whatever the word you want to use. That can split a marriage in a heartbeat because you don't even know that person anymore. Right? So you can fall out of range either direction, either raising your vibration or, having to go back and recoup something at a deep soul level. And I think the point here is that don't make it wrong. Please get out of the blame of he said, she said, and it's all your fault. And
yes.
Yeah.
It's just, we are in a different space. And thank you so much for the time we've spent together. If it was a non-violent relationship, a non-abusive relationship, thank you very much for the time we spent together. Let's have a great future. Towards that end, prior to my going into family law, I was in the entertainment business my entire life. What traveling entertainment until I got to Los Angeles in the late 80s. Then I produced both headliner and cover bands for private events.
Cool.
A lot of the events I did were West Side weddings. West Side, of course, is like the very high income, high net worth population of Los Angeles. I love weddings. I enjoy the whole vibe about weddings. I love the food and I love the entertainment, especially when I was presenting it. But I remember standing at the ceremony. I really did love the ceremonies, but there was a certain point when I said, wait a minute, these vows should change.
Right.
Unrealistic words to say. More realistically would be, let's embark together. Let's see what we can learn. Let's see what we can grow. Hopefully this will take us, where we both need to be in our lives. But, this whole thing about the way it's structured, the way it sets us up is for this unrealistic ability to sustain the relationship when shit happens.
Totally. Well, and, think about it this way. I mean, you're spot on, first of all. And if you think about it this way, that most people can't even show up for themselves for a whole lifetime without abandoning themselves. How do you expect to show up for another person for a whole lifetime without abandoning them or the relationship? I mean, we need to learn some foundational things here. And the first thing is how to show up for yourself and not turn your back on yourself when you know what works for you and what doesn't work for you, what your needs are. Start showing up for yourself and start stepping forward and creating for yourself it within the realm of what's important to you. Then you'll actually have something to bring to the table to even think about having that kind of a vow with another person. We've got it all backwards, Judith, I think.
I kind of think so too. I loved when Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell said, there's no reason to get married. Every day is an individual commitment to be together. And when that day comes that we choose not to make that commitment, that'll be fine as well.
That's right.
And I also noticed when people come to me to get divorced, either, as a mediator or as a paralegal, I find it fascinating that there are a lot of couples who have been together unmarried for years. Then all of a sudden they get married and within a year or two, they're in my office. They can't sustain that new definition of their relationship. Can you maybe add something to that?
Well, it sounds like they're getting in their head about it. They're, instead of being in the energy of it, they're in the social construct of it. And, I think we're all tired of living up to social constructs that are unreasonable and not really based in an understanding of how humans actually grow and evolve. So the pressure is just like, okay, well, now we're supposed to be this thing. I remember I was doing some coaching one time with a leadership team of a huge company. I guess it wasn't that huge, had about 5,000 employees. And there was this one fellow that was on the leadership team, and he's just refused, just dug his heels in and refused to participate in the retreat with any significance. And his excuse was, I just put on my game face, I go to work, I do my job, and I go home. And that kind of attitude is just that you're not separate. You're no different at work than you are at home. There is no game face. Just be real. Be authentic. Bring your greatest authentic self to the relationship. And I'm not suggesting you bail out at the least sign of trouble. Show some fortitude and work through the knots, because whatever comes up, remember, everybody's a mirror. So whatever gets popped up there is an opportunity to grow yourself and, be loving and gentle with one another. And if you really truly give it your best, which why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you give your absolute best in every area of your life? Why would you hold back anything? So once you've done that, if the longevity truly isn't there, instead of hating on the other person when you exit, take the love with you. The love doesn't die. See, this is another nonsense that we're programmed. The love doesn't die. Take the love with you. You're the love.
Yes, you're the love, but also you brought up another really good point, and that is, if you have a relationship where you had great times and then it changed, the energy changed, you're evolving, you're both evolving, don't deny the good times. It's okay to have good times, and then it's okay, I guess, to evolve and be in another place.
And yes, and then you take that growth with you. If we can, as individuals, look within more, if we could endeavor to look within more and blame less, criticize less, and, celebrate more, then I think we'd be less apt to feel powerless. Because if you're blaming the other person, then you're basically in some sort of victim mentality, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And there could be those unusual situations where you're just blindsided. This person's been living a double life. I just read something on Yahoo the other day, a double life. Okay, well, I think that's kind of the exception to the norm. Generally, the way I look at divorce and talk to the people that I'm dealing with is, you both participated in everything in this relationship. And so to blame one person, to blame it all is ridiculous. It is what it is. There are reasons why things happen. There are reasons why we behave in the way that we behave. And my whole philosophy of life, the only way that I can make sense out of life, because it can be, Deborah, crazy making. Maybe not for you, but it can be for me. The only way it's not like suicidal crazy is if I look at everything as a learning experience, frame any single thing that happens to me as a learning experience. What should I get from this that will help me advance and be a better person, be a more functional person? What is that? What am I supposed to learn? All of a sudden it makes sense. All of a sudden it's like, okay, I can actually get something from what presumably 5 minutes ago was one of the worst experiences of my life.
Sure. Well, and, so let's talk about cheating and double lives and, all of these, what's the term for that, when you're being disingenuous and you're living a lie, basically, in your relationship. So, couple things. First of all, one of the exercises I would give couples is to review their marriage every year. Sit down together like you're reviewing your own year of goals and productivity and life happiness and joy and fulfillment. And you do that with your partner. And so it never gets too far south, right? If it's headed south, never gets too far south. Doesn't hurt to have those discussions quarterly, half yearly. It's about alignment. We put way too much pressure on a marriage by just getting in and saying, okay, everything's going to be cool for the next 20 years. And we don't actually have to talk about it. It's ridiculous. So I would give that exercise because there are lots of marriages that there's cheaters, there's liars, there's financial ruin that's going on in the background, addictions. We're human beings, we all have something going on. And so the question that begs asking is, as an individual within the marriage, who are you being with you? Are you being that dishonest person? Is this a game to see what you can get over on the other person? Like, who are you really being? Because if you can't keep the agreements with yourself, how are you going to possibly keep the agreements with a partner? So there's that aspect of it. And then the other aspect is, as the partner being bamboozled, where are you? Where are you? Why are you not in present time enough to feel the energy of what's not in alignment here? I had this conversation recently with someone, and I asked him, it was very early on, just met the guy, and I asked him if he was single. And he was honest with me. He really was. And I appreciated that about him.
And the answer was no, right?
The answer was no. So that gave me an opportunity to make a decision. But here's the most important part, Judith, is the reason I asked the question is I could feel a woman's energy on him.
Oh.
I knew. I felt it and I trusted it. So I asked the question. And see, this is where you can't be checked out in your marriage and not paying attention, because the energy shifts. When people lie or when people withhold information or are doing something wonky or untoward, their energy contracts. And it's up to you as part of that marriage to be paying attention to what's going on. And if you feel something's off, identify it. Yeah. That's the responsibility. And then nobody can bamboozle you. If you get bamboozled, it's because you're not paying attention. I'm sorry, it sounds harsh. I'm sorry.
I know. Well, I've always wished I was part of these conversations when I read these articles online.
Right.
These are relationships and these crazy things people do. I kind of wish I was in the room asking questions, because how could this have happened to the extent that it happened? This is pretty impressive. Very impressive. I don't want us to go on without stopping, and I want to address two things. There's actually 3 bullet points I wanted to cover with you because they're important points to you. The first 2 I kind of look as juxtaposed, and you have used the word alignment a lot. But the 2 things I want you to talk about and compare are values alignment for relationships, which you kind of started doing already,
sure. Yeah.
versus vibration alignment. And you have talked about energy too. So how do people engage in values alignment and vibration alignment?
Well, they're kind of the same. Remember when I was talking about the spiral? You know? So the spiral of, I guess we'd call them value systems, is an energetic process. Our evolving as human beings in our consciousness is an energetic process. Words are energy. That's why they call it spelling. We're weaving spells with our words.
Ooh.
And values are we use words to describe our values. So values might be fun, kind, outgoing, fit, economically stable. Like those could be values, right? Mm-hmm. And we identify these, whether it's conscious or unconscious, because that's a program we receive as children. Our values are programmed into us from like 0 to 14-ish, maybe a little bit less depending on the situation. And if we have parents that talk about values, then we're aware of them. Otherwise, they're just something that are percolating and running in the background in our subconscious. So this is all one, like it's all the same. And our values shift, meaning our energy shifts as we change our lives, and our lives change as our values shift. So, for example, your values in, say, college or shortly after as a single person are going to be different than that person that's become married, typically. I should hope so, right? You have different responsibilities, and you've made a commitment to someone that you need to uphold by keeping your commitments to yourself. Then we have children. Our values shift again. We take on debt. We get promotions, or we start and launch a company and grow a business. Values are this intrinsic, intangible thing that we don't see on the surface, and they are energy, because we use words to describe them, and words weave spell over our existence, over how our mind functions.
I love that you use the word spell and spelling and use that in the context of the power that words have. That they can be a spell over somebody, which is really important, I think, when people are in disagreement and they're arguing, to really pay attention to what you say in those arguments.
Yeah.
Because sometimes those words can be destructive to the point where you've really gone a different course with your energy now.
Yeah. Yeah. And, that's a reflection of how you treat yourself. It really is. The way you speak to another is your own inner dialogue being projected outwardly. And I remember I was in the gym one time, and this gal, we were in the locker room, and she forgot something in her gym bag for class. And she's like, "Oh my God, I'm such an idiot." And I didn't even know this girl. And I'm like, "You take that back." And she's like, look at me. And I'm like, "Don't talk to yourself that way." And then you can see this light bulb go on, and she's like, "Oh, that was such a habit for her. She didn't even realize how hard she was on herself." So imagine taking that into a relationship when you're all triggered and you're lit up like a Christmas tree, and the fight is on, or the flight is on because you're scared of being vulnerable. We project this stuff at people, and it's because the way we treat ourselves. I was speaking one time at a conference, and Naomi Judd was one of the speakers as well.
Oh, and she has a story to tell.
She has quite the story. Yeah. And she was, I'll keep it short. She basically was saying that she finally left her abusive husband, packed up her kids, drove across the country, checked into a motel in Hollywood. Kids were in bed. She had finally had a minute to herself, walked into the bathroom, looked in the mirror, and she's all black and blue. And she had this meltdown moment where she said out loud to herself in the mirror, "Oh my gosh, I'm abusing myself through this man." And that was her turning point. That was her turning point. That's where she became a star, because you can't beat yourself down and go after the big things in life. You have to, at some point, learn to love yourself.
That's really powerful. I am abusing myself through this man, through this relationship.
Yeah.
I am allowing it to happen.
And that's where you can take your power back and say, I'm not going to allow someone to treat me this way anymore, because I'm not going to treat me this way anymore.
Right. And then when you change, it's amazing how the other person changes. Now they have to shift. you are a different ball of energy and they don't know what to do.
All the time. Because remember, we train people how to treat us. And we train people how to treat us by the way we respond to treatment or by the way we don't respond to treatment. So someone insults you or crosses boundaries and you don't check it, you don't put them in check. You don't have to be harsh about it. You're clear. You need to be clear. And if we don't, then it's like, oh, I can do this. Let me just, give them an inch, they take a mile kind of thing. And it just gets out of control. For sure.
A few weeks ago, I had the same experience twice in a day.
Wow. Lucky
One
you.
was with a client and one was with a colleague in an evening professional meeting. And it was basically the same experience. And the experience was they were speaking to me in an untoward way. They were being aggressive. Couple different reasons, but it doesn't matter. It's the way they were talking to me. And I had never responded like this before, but I was so proud of myself. I'll tell you what I said. And it just changed me. I turned a corner all of a sudden. And what I said was, you're speaking to me in a personally aggressive way. Let's end this conversation before we say anything we'll regret, and let's come back to it later. And the first gentleman, the client, said, I'm so sorry. Yeah. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to do that. And I said, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And we finished the conversation. The colleague who had done this to me 2 times previous to this evening, to that particular evening, I said the same thing. I think at this point it may be a good time to end the conversation in case either of us says something that we might regret. And he said, men in both cases, he said, oh, I meant what I said.
Wow.
And I said, okay, then I do not want to be treated in an aggressive way, in a verbal, personal, aggressive way. I'm going to remove myself from the conversation.
Yeah.
And then he apologized.
Yeah, you had to take it another step.
Yes. And it wasn't being critical of them. It wasn't arguing with them. It's just, I'd never stood up for myself. And Deborah, I have this ongoing relationship with my girlfriends who all are professionals. And we are never ready for when men speak to us in an adverse way. For some unknown reason, we are taken aback, and to say anything is fearful to us. And what I did that day in those 2 different conversations, I have to tell you, I stole it from Clive Davis, who has been president of Arista Records and then J Records. Do you know who I mean when I say?
Love Clive Davis.
Okay, I love Clive Davis. And so I'm watching his Netflix special, The Soundtrack of Our Lives, like 30 million times because it's the best 2.5-hour concert I've gone to in a while. And Clive is brilliant. And he's so low key when he talks. And he was having a conversation with David Foster, enormously famous record producer and songwriter. And they were talking about the Whitney Houston track on the song I'll Always Love You on The Bodyguard. David had just cut it as a rough mix in the Malibu studio and sent it to Clive. And they were on the phone talking about it. It was late at night. And Clive said, it's perfect. It's perfect, David. Perfect. Let's use it the way it is. Don't. And David, who of course has an ego, who doesn't have an ego at that level, they said, no, of course I want to put strings. I want to do this. I want to do that. And Clive said, please don't. This is brilliant the way it is. So he's complimenting David, but David's in his own head about, what he wants to make as a statement. And that's what Clive said. And it stayed in my head. David, I think we should get off the phone now. Let's end this conversation before we say anything that we might regret, because we really are going to continue to work together. And David stopped. He respected Clive enough that he said, okay.
Nice.
So just, for anybody out there that's in a tough relationship, You do have to speak up, but you don't have to yell.
It's true. And what happens with the yelling is typically they've waited too long to speak up. You know, I remember just before I got into coaching, I was a professional speaker. I was traveling around speaking, and I wanted to develop my skill set. So I took a communication skills class, and then I led into a negotiations class. And I remember the facilitator, lovely woman from South Africa, and she said, "What's more important, being able to have a conversation with a friend who owes you $5 or with a client who owes you 5,000?" And of course, they put up their hand for the 5,000, right? And she said, "No, if you can't have the conversation around the $5, you'll never have it around the 5,000."
Brilliant. I completely concur. And it's the $5 with the friend that eats you alive.
All day long.
Because there's that trust, there's that bond, there's that relationship. It's easy to just invoice the client or hire an attorney or a bill. No, you're so right. With that, I want to cover one other point that I just love, Deborah, and pardon me if I'm reading it incorrectly. You'll straighten me out here. But quoting you, actually, we are never rejected, talking about relationships. We are never rejected, comma. We repel all relationships, causing them to change dynamic. Most people call this an ending. It's just a realignment of vibration between two people. I love. Could you talk more about that? I love that you said this.
It's I really think most of us struggle with abandonment issues, and that was a big issue for me, a large part of my life. And I'd kind of set myself up for it, I did. And I look at it now and I could see where I was setting myself up. And then I just, I'm a big nature walker, and I was out walking one time. I think I was hiking up the mountains, and I had this epiphany that the last person that walked out of my life, boyfriend, I was done long before he ever left. It was me. I had shifted and changed so much about me, mentally, emotionally, financially, physically, geographically, all of it, that it just wasn't working. It wasn't a fit anymore. What brought us together, this is good. What brought us together, the original point of connection between us, was no more. And we had not fostered any new points of connection that had enough depth to take us to the next level. So I repelled him. When I figured that out, when I saw that in my mind, it changed my whole reality or past history on love relationships. So yeah, we repel everything.
And I think this could be the point where we can start another conversation at another point. We've reached the end of our hour, because I'm very interested in helping people who are just on the precipice. Kind of think we're going to get divorced, not really sure. Maybe there's something to save. And even though this is a podcast about amicable divorces, there's still so much that goes into that decision to get divorced. And I want to make sure people are covering everything they need to cover. So I would love to invite you back at some point in your very busy schedule to really start with the point where you just left off here, because I think it's an important point.
I love that so much. Today's been so good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know what your schedule's like. You're very demanding clients, and you're not always in town. So thank you so much for carving out some time for us. I learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners have as well. For anybody who would like to engage you as a business coach, because you were telling me personal life comes into the way you run your business, right?
All the time.
And you're not doing couples counseling anymore, though, right?
Not really. I mean, sometimes it comes into, especially companies that are family run. Oh my goodness. That's a whole other conversation.
Yes.
But, I do boot camps. I do business boot camps. And in the business boot camp, I cover a lot about relationship dynamics because even employees and management teams are like families, and there's divorces all the time. So it's all there. Yeah.
That's right. So Deborah, even though things will be in show notes, how can people get in touch with you?
So my website is NEImind, MIND.com. So NEIMIND.com. And it stands for Neuro-Engineering Institute.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you.
This has been a pleasure. You have been a most unusual guest. So thank you for coming into my life and connecting with me.
You too. Many blessings.
And thank all of you for listening. I appreciate each and every one of you. I hope this episode has been a help and very positive for you. Please share this with your friends. Subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, have an amicable day.
That's our show for today. Thank you for joining us. Be good to yourselves, be kind to your spouse, and cherish your children above all else.